Hey there, sleepy wanderer. Before we drift back through the sands of time, make sure you're comfortable. Lie back. Feel your blanket's weight like a warm linen, cloth pulled over you in a tiny mud brick house somewhere along the Nile. Take a breath. The air tastes of dry reeds and distant water. Tonight, or is it morning already? We will wake up as an ancient Egyptian farmer. No royal guard at your door. No golden mask to polish. Just straw beneath your elbows, a cracked clay lamp at your feet, and the gentle ache of a back that knows the shape of a wooden plow better than the pharaoh's face. Your eyes flutter open in the half-dark. The oil lamp flickers. The flame is low now, but steady. Its tiny light dances across the mud-plastered wall where your wife once pressed her palm to smooth the clay. You trace your eyes along the uneven surface, tiny cracks like lines on your palms. You shift your shoulder. The straw mat rustles. A piece pricks your hip, but it's familiar, a comfort of sorts. Near the wall, your son sleeps. His tiny back rises and falls under a frayed linen scrap. His hand is closed around the straw doll you made for him last winter when the harvest was good enough for scraps of spare straw. You remember sitting by this very lamp, twisting the reeds into tiny arms, bending the doll's back like your own after hours in the field. You smile, just a little. Outside, a donkey brays somewhere down the lane. You hear the faint slap of a neighbor's sandals on dry earth. Life begins early here, but you still have a few moments, a few precious, stolen breaths of warmth before the river's soft whisper calls you to work. You close your eyes again. The Nile has waited thousands of years. It can wait for you too. You hear your wife's soft movements first. The dry crackle of reeds feeding the hearth. The faint cough as she stirs the embers back to life. She murmurs a prayer to herself, a whisper you cannot catch. She has always risen before you. You think back to when you first shared this house, how she would push the cold from the corners before your eyes ever opened. She has always been the warmer of the two of you. You sit up, stretching your back until it pops softly. You rub your palm along your shins. The skin is rough from so many barefoot seasons in the fields. You pick a bit of straw from your shoulder, rolling it between your fingers before dropping it to the floor. Outside the reed door, the sky is pinking pale rose and dusty gold. A gentle wind weaves through the yard, rustling the tops of the date palms like a soft song. You stand, crossing the hard dirt floor, and push aside the reed mat. The world greets you with its hush. You bend over a clay jar near the doorway, scooping water with cupped hands. The water is shockingly cold against your cheeks. You gasp, eyes wide, heart beating. The chill fades to warmth as the wind dries your face. Behind you, your son appears at the doorway, blinking at the dawn. He clutches the rope for the oxen. The rope drags along the dirt, leaving a crooked line behind him. His hair sticks up at odd angles. A tiny bird's nest atop his sleepy head. You grin. You tousle his hair, and he buries his nose into your side. Today, he wants to come with you. To the fields, to the river's edge, to learn the feel of soil beneath his nails. He wants to become you, and you feel that small, beautiful ache in your chest that makes you more awake than any splash of water. Inside, your wife hums as she stirs the ashes of the hearth. She feeds dry fronds and a few sticks to the hungry embers until the flame dances again. Smoke curls up through a hole in the roof, a thin gray ghost twisting into the pale dawn. She glances at you, her smile soft but tired, eyes creased at the corners. Your daughter stirs awake, rubbing her eyes with tiny fists, hair sticking in damp tufts against her forehead. She crawls into her mother's lap, nuzzling against the soft linen of her dress. Her mother smooths her hair back with a warm, work-rough hand. On a reed mat near the fire, your breakfast waits, small round loaves of barley bread wrapped in a linen cloth, A shallow clay bowl with a few leftover figs, and a jug of beer still cool from the night's breeze. You crouch near the fire, pulling your son close. He yawns, resting his head on your knee. You tear off a piece of bread, dip it in the beer, and pop it into your mouth. It tastes slightly sour, the grain rough on your tongue, but it's yours. Grown in the strip of black soil that has fed your family longer than your memory can reach. Your daughter pulls at your sleeve. You offer her a crumb, and she giggles, a sleepy bubble of laughter that echoes softly in the tiny house. Your wife hums again, the tune older than both of you, a song her mother sang when she was small, when fires and bread were the same, no matter whose name the pharaoh wore that year. When the bread is gone, you rise. You brush crumbs from your tunic, lift the rough rope that loops around the wooden plow. You run your thumb along the grain of the plow blade, worn smooth and polished by countless furrows. It hums under your touch, the memory of fields carved season after season. Your wife hands you a small wrapped bundle, more bread, a few figs, maybe a piece of dried fish if you're lucky. She presses it into your palm, as though pressing her warmth into your bones. You cup her cheek for a moment, your calloused thumb rough against her smooth skin. She leans into your hand. There are no words, just the hush of shared mornings. Your daughter peeks from behind her mother's dress, waving her tiny fingers. Your son stands taller now, shoulders squared, the plow rope tight in his fist. He wants to be useful. He wants to be you. You nod at him, and he grins wide enough to show the gap where his front tooth fell out last season. Together, you step into the yard. The oxen wait, patient, soft-eyed, tails swishing lazily against the early flies. Their warm breath clouds in the pale light. You whisper to them as you tie the rope, calling them by the names your father did, your grandfather did, and the soil seems to remember too. At the edge of the field, you pause. You turn back. Your wife stands in the doorway, the morning sun gilding her shoulders, your daughter curled at her side. She lifts her hand, a blessing without words. May the plow be light. May the oxen be strong. May the river remember you kindly. You step carefully along the packed earth yard, the sun just beginning to peek over the palm fronds, casting your shadow long and thin, like a reed dancing on the riverbank. Your wife emerges behind you, carrying a shallow woven basket. Inside, a small offering, a round loaf of barley bread, a cluster of dried figs, a clay jug of leftover beer, and a few lotus petals she gathered from the canal's edge last night. Your daughter clings to her mother's hip, half asleep but wide-eyed. She watches as you lift the small bundle to your shoulder, the rough linen pressing into your collarbone, and you catch her gaze. She giggles when you wink, burying her face in her mother's dress. The oxen shuffle behind you, tails swishing, stirring dust into the soft dawn air. The scent of warming earth drifts around you, clay, straw, the faint sweetness of the beer jug. Your son runs ahead, bare feet slapping the dry dirt. He stops by the shrine's shade, an ancient sycamore tree with roots older than your grandfather's grandfather, and he waits, his hand pressed against the trunk, as if he's listening for the heartbeat of the land. You follow the dusty path through the rows of palms. The shrine is just beyond the village's edge, where the river bends toward the fields. The earth here is softer, darker, rich silt from the river's endless gifts. You feel it cling to your sandals, damp and cool. Your oxen wait nearby, noses dipping to sniff the wet reeds. You pause, hand resting on the plow. You listen. The river hums a song you've known all your life. Your son points at a cluster of lotus blossoms drifting near the bank. He runs to pick one, careful not to slip on the muddy bank. He turns, his grin wide as he hands it to you. A good sign, you whisper. A flower to please the gods. Your wife kneels near the shrine, which is nothing more than a few stacked stones under the wide embrace of the sycamore. Tiny clay amulets, Osiris, Isis, Anubis, rest at its base, worn smooth by hundreds of whispered prayers and brushing fingertips. Your daughter wriggles from her mother's lap to place the lotus beside the bread. She tries to hum the same tune her mother always sings, but it comes out as a string of sweet, sleepy nonsense. You kneel beside your wife. Together, you bow your heads. Your fingers brush the clay figure of Osiris, chipped but precious, and you murmur thanks for the harvest that was, the harvest that might be. Your son tries to mimic your pose, but his eyes keep drifting to the flicker of light between the trees, where the sun is threading gold into the morning. You reach out, ruffle his hair, and he grins sheepishly, burying his nose in the crook of his elbow. Your wife's voice is low, a hush in the hush. She asks for strong oxen, gentle rain, a steady hand on the plow. She asks that the Nile keep its promises, that it rises when it should, that it falls when it must, that it leaves behind enough black earth to feed your family again. Your daughter hums beside her, eyes half closed, her tiny palms pressed flat against the warm stone. The air here smells of old roots, river water, and the sweet rot of fallen figs. You close your eyes, imagining the river's song, washing your worries down to the delta, carrying your small family's prayers with it. Your prayers done, you lead the oxen closer to the water's edge. The animals bow their heads, slurping from the shallows, ripples spreading across the mud. You watch them drink, patient, loyal, warm. Your son runs a hand along one's flank, feeling the ribbed rise and fall of its breath. He murmurs something you can't hear, maybe a wish, maybe a promise that one day he'll hold the plow alone. Your wife stands behind you, a hand on your shoulder. The sun has crested the palms now, washing the world in soft gold. You turn to her, and she presses a clay amulet into your palm, a tiny falcon, the god Horus. She insists it keeps you safe. You slide it into the fold of your tunic, close to your heart. Together, you watch the oxen lift their heads, water dripping from their soft muzzles. The day has begun. You leave the shrine with the rising sun at your back. The soft weight of your family's blessings presses warm against your collarbone, the clay falcon amulet tucked close to your heart. Your son walks beside you, half hopping to match your long strides. The oxen lumber ahead, tails flicking at the drifting morning flies. The path winds through the last edge of the village, a scatter of mud brick huts, reed fences, and small canals that catch the Nile's breath. You nod to your neighbor, squatting at his doorway, chewing a stem of sweet reed, while his wife sweeps yesterday's dust from their threshold. He lifts 2 fingers, a silent wish for your plow to carve straight and deep. Your feet find every bump and dip in the hardened track. You've walked it so many times, the soles of your sandals carry the memory of every stone. The air hums with tiny sounds, the scrape of your plow blade knocking your knee, the distant caw of ibis, the shiver of reeds brushing each other when the wind slips through. The field lies open like an old friend waiting for your hands, a stretch of rich black silt, wet from the Nile's last kiss. You stand at its edge, the oxen snorting softly, sniffing the damp earth. You drop to one knee and press your palm flat against the soil. It's cool, dark, and gives slightly under your fingers. Good earth, faithful earth. Your son squats beside you, eyes wide as you let a handful trickle through your fingers. He giggles when a tiny beetle scurries away, hiding under a curl of fresh sprout. You touch his shoulder and point out the first furrow line, invisible to him, but clear to you. A path that your father taught you to see when you were just his size. With a soft click of your tongue, the oxen shift forward. The rope pulls taut across your chest as you guide the plow's nose into the first bite of earth. The blade shudders through the topsoil, turning the dark silt aside, like the page of a book you've read 1,000 times. but never tire of. You fall into the rhythm. Step, pull, guide, breathe. Midway through the first furrow, you pause. You straighten your back, rolling your shoulders until they pop. The river glimmers just beyond the palms, a winding silver snake catching the early sun. A soft breeze drifts over the fields, carrying the scent of wet reeds and the faint sweetness of lotus blossoms. The air tastes like promise, like the gods have cupped your family in their warm palms for one more season. You watch your son crouch near the canal that snakes through the field. He cups a handful of water, letting it trickle over his dusty feet. He giggles at the tickle of tiny fish darting away. The oxen shift, snorting and stamping, impatient to keep moving. You pat their flanks, murmuring soft words only they and the river can hear. You work the plow down each row, the soft scrape and creak in time with your heart. With each new furrow, you tell your son a story. You speak of your father, how he once tilled this same soil under a hotter sun, with fewer tools but stronger hands. You tell him about the time the Nile rose too high and swept the seeds away, but the next season it returned with rich black silt, so thick your fingers disappeared into it. Your son listens, wide-eyed, wiping sweat from his brow with a corner of his tunic. He drags his tiny stick in the dirt, mimicking the plow, carving his own small furrows that crisscross your own, a child's promise to the land. By mid-morning, the field hums with life. Ibis pick at the upturned soil, searching for tiny grubs. The sun slips higher, brushing your shoulders with its warmth. You call for a pause. The oxen stand still, their flanks heaving slow and steady. You crouch by the canal's edge, splash in your face, then cup water to your son's lips. He drinks greedily, drops rolling down his chin. You pull out the linen bundle your wife packed at dawn, a small loaf of barley bread, a handful of figs, a scrap of dried fish. You sit cross-legged in the shade of a single palm. The breeze rustles its fronds, like an old woman brushing a broom over a courtyard floor. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the hush, the oxen's breath, your son's tiny hum, the river's endless promise. The sun climbs higher, painting the fields with slow, golden brushstrokes. You wipe your brow with the hem of your tunic, feeling the sting of sweat trickling into your eyes. The oxen stand patient, flanks shimmering in the heat haze, tails lazily flicking at stubborn flies. Your son sits on a patch of shade, cast by your plow's long handle. He draws tiny shapes in the dirt with a reed stalk, winding lines that look like the curves of the river you love so much. Every so often, he glances up, eyes squinting under the bright noon sky, looking for your nod of approval, your unspoken promise that soon you'll pause again. You kneel, pressing your palms into the soil to feel its warmth. You know each furrow like a heartbeat now, each curve a memory of seasons past. The harvest is not yet ripe, but you prepare the field's edges, weeding and packing the soil where needed, turning over dry stalks that might choke the young shoots. It's slow work, the kind of work that invites quiet thoughts. You remember your father's rough voice beside you, telling you when the barley heads should bend, when the stalks would whisper that they're ready to be cut. You hear his voice still, carried on the hush of the river wind. After tending to the field edges, you lead your son and oxen back to the canal's bend. The water here is clearer than near the shrine, shallow and cool, shaded by a lean cluster of date palms. You drop to your knees, letting the muddy bank squish between your toes. Your son squeals as he splashes water on his neck, the droplets glinting like tiny beads of jade against his sun-warmed skin. You rinse your arms up to the elbows, watching the fine silt swirl and drift away. You take a reed basket from your shoulder, packed with the simple lunch your wife wrapped at dawn. Bread, dried fish, a few figs, a sip of beer in a small clay jug. You break the bread slowly, dipping it into the cool canal water before passing half to your son. He munches, cheeks puffed out, eyes half closed like a drowsy sparrow. You eat in small, patient bites, a ritual in itself, as the oxen wade into the shallows, slurping contentedly. When the meal is gone, you lie back on the sloping bank. The earth is warm but forgiving, the grass soft under your shoulders. Your son curls beside you, his small head pillowed on your outstretched arm. He hums a broken tune, something his mother sings when she grinds barley at night. You let the tune drift through you like the river's whisper. You watch the sky through the fronds, little scraps of cloud drifting like lotus petals. The heat slows your thoughts to a lazy trickle. You remember the old stories of Osiris drifting down the Nile, of the gods who once walked these banks with bare feet, blessing the water to keep it flowing forever. You doze for a moment, caught between the pull of the sun and the river's cool murmur. The oxen shuffle in the shallows, their tails splashing gentle ripples that brush against your bare feet. When you wake, the sun has slipped past its peak. The shadows stretch longer, the air softer against your skin. Your son sleeps on, a hand still clutching a reed stalk. You smile, brushing the hair from his forehead. You sit up slowly, mindful not to disturb his small dreams. Nearby, the oxen rouse too, snorting as they pull away from the water's edge. You whisper to them, words older than your own name, a promise that soon they will rest under the sycamore's arms again. You stand, feeling the stretch in your back, the soft ache in your shoulders, reminders that you belong to this earth as much as it belongs to you. You lift your son in your arms, careful not to wake him, and carry him toward the waiting field. The plow waits too, old, splintered, but faithful. The day isn't done yet, and neither are you. The sun has slipped from its sharp midday blaze into a softer, honeyed glow. You walk the familiar path from the canal, your son still tucked on your hip, his head bobbing with each step, half awake, half dreaming of the river's song. The oxen move slowly behind you, each footstep pressing deep, fresh prints into the soft silt. They grunt low and patient, their shadows stretching long over the earth. When you reach the field again, you lower your son onto a patch of shade cast by a cluster of wild reeds. He rolls onto his back, blinking up at the drifting clouds, one hand outstretched as if he could brush them away. You lift the plow's handle, its old wood warm under your palms. You click your tongue, and the oxen shuffle forward once more. Each furrow you carve now feels different, slower, deeper, as if the land itself is sighing in relief beneath your steady blade. As the sun dips lower, the shadows grow bold. They spill from the oxen's flanks, from your shoulders, from the neat rows you've already turned. You pause often now, letting the oxen breathe, letting your arms rest against the warm wood of the plow's handle. You glance at your son every few moments. He hums to himself, plucking tiny flowers from the reeds, tucking them behind his ears, as if the gods themselves might notice and smile. A soft wind drifts across the field, carrying the faint scent of river lily and wet earth. Insects hum their slow evening chorus. Far off, you can hear the thud of another plow blade. Your neighbor working the last stretch before the day sighs to a close. You kneel beside the plow's blade, brushing your fingertips along the furrow's edge. The soil parts so willingly, a promise between you and the land. You whisper a thank you under your breath, an old prayer passed down from father to son to grandson. Your son crawls over, smearing dirt on his knees. He presses his small palm flat on the freshly turned earth, as if he's sealing your whispered promise with his own. He asks you if the seeds dream while they wait for the Nile's kiss. You smile, telling him yes, that each seed sleeps with stories of the river, of the sun, of the wind that will carry their scent to the gods. The oxen snort behind you. They know it's almost time to rest. You run a hand along one's broad neck, feeling the damp warmth beneath its short fur. You guide the plow one last time, carving a clean final line that catches the low sun and casts it in gold. Your son walks beside you now, matching your pace. He holds onto the rope that guides the oxen, tiny fingers gripping rough fibers, face serious as he tries to mirror your movements. Together, you finish the row. The oxen pull true and strong, the soil giving way in a smooth hush. The air is thick with the smell of fresh earth, mixed with the sweet smoke from the village hearths drifting over the fields. When you reach the end of the furrow, you stop. You drop the rope and lay your palm flat on the oxen's warm side. They breathe slow, patient, loyal, as old as the land itself. You lean down to your son's level, pressing your forehead to his. You tell him he did well today, that the field knows his steps now, and the seeds will remember his tiny hands. With the plow resting against the field's edge, you gather your son onto your hip once more. He wraps his arms around your neck, eyes drifting shut, the earth scent clinging to his hair. The oxen follow you without being led, their hooves pressing soft dents into the dusty path. Ahead, the village roofs glow rose and amber under the setting sun, smoke rising in thin, lazy threads. Somewhere, a dog barks once, then falls quiet again. You hum a tune your wife sings when she bakes bread, a melody that feels like home. Your son's breathing slows, and you imagine him dreaming of furrows and rivers, of seeds that sleep beneath the soil. You promise the land you'll return tomorrow. Same steps, same prayers, same hush of the Nile guiding your plow. The field sighs behind you, rows of turned earth glowing under the last light. You feel the day's weight in your shoulders, but it's a good, honest weight. Your son's arms are wrapped around your neck, his breath warm against your collarbone. The oxen plod ahead of you, hooves stirring little puffs of dust along the village path. A gentle breeze slips through the palms, carrying the scent of wood smoke and fresh bread from home. Other farmers pass you, nodding in that quiet way, a shared promise that tomorrow you'll meet again in the fields, shoulder to shoulder with the sun. Your son stirs awake for a moment, lifting his head to see the village lights flicker through the reeds. He smiles sleepily and buries his face back into your shoulder. You pass through the reed fence into your courtyard. Your wife waits by the doorway, her arms folded gently over her belly. She smiles when she sees your son asleep, mouth open like a baby bird. She brushes your cheek with her fingertips, the simple welcome you've known since you first brought the plow home as a young husband. The oxen shuffle to their small pen by the side wall. You rub their flanks, whispering thanks for another faithful day. They nuzzle your palms, heavy heads dipping low in the fading light. Inside, the clay lamps are already lit, their soft flicker dancing along the mud brick walls. You feel the day slip from your shoulders the moment you step over the threshold. You lower your son onto the cool stone floor. He blinks, eyes wide at the glow of the lamps. Your wife lifts him gently, wiping dirt from his cheeks with a damp cloth. He giggles half asleep, arms dangling at his sides. You sit by the small wash basin, splashing your face and arms with water scented faintly of sweet reeds. The dirt comes away slowly, leaving your skin warm and tingling. Your wife kneels beside you, pressing a piece of linen into your hands. You dry your arms and lean your head against her shoulder for a moment. No words needed, just the hush of home and the steady promise of her heartbeat. Dinner is simple but precious. A flat loaf of barley bread, a bowl of lentils cooked soft with herbs, and a tiny dish of salted fish. Your son sits cross-legged beside you, tearing his bread into uneven pieces, popping them into his mouth between giggles. Your wife hums as she pours you a sip of cool beer. The taste is bitter but familiar, like the earth itself pressed into a drink. The flicker of the clay lamps dances on your son's hair, turning it the color of ripe grain. You listen to him tell your wife about the oxen, about the tiny beetle he saw, about how he held the rope for the first time. Every word is precious, each one planting a new memory you'll carry back to the field tomorrow. When the meal is done, your son curls up in your lap. Your wife leans her head on your shoulder, her hand resting over your wrist. Outside, the night air hums with the soft sounds of crickets and the distant rush of the river. You whisper an old story, a tale of the first farmer who asked the Nile for her blessing. You tell it slow, each word like a small wave rolling through the dark. Your son's eyes drift shut before the story's end. Your wife smiles into your neck, pressing a soft kiss to your temple. You look toward the small window, the moon rising above the palms. Tomorrow, you'll walk the same path, the same plow, the same earth, the same hush of the river that cradles every farmer's dream. The night has settled around your home like a soft, warm blanket. Inside the mud brick walls, the clay lamps burn low, each one a tiny sun that keeps the darkness just far enough away. You move slowly from lamp to lamp, pinching the wicks to keep them burning true. The flame flickers across your son's sleeping face where he lies curled on a woven mat, his small hands tucked under his cheek. Your wife sweeps the floor with a bundle of dry reeds, the hush of bristles on clay mixing with the distant hum of insects outside. The air smells of warm oil, sweet with the hint of crushed herbs she keeps in tiny jars near the hearth. Once the lamps are tended, you kneel by the small household shrine, a simple shelf carved into the mud brick wall, holding tiny clay figures of the gods. You press your forehead to the cool clay, whispering your thanks for the day's safety, for the plow that did not break, for the oxen that did not tire, for the hands that worked beside yours. Your wife kneels beside you, her whisper blending with yours. Your son stirs in his sleep, mumbling a half-word, a scrap of dream that drifts toward the shrine and disappears into the night. You stay there a while, letting the hush settle into your bones, letting the gods cradle your hopes for tomorrow like a handful of seeds. Before sleep takes you, you step outside once more. The village is hushed now, only the rustle of palms and the distant murmur of the Nile drifting through the dark. You walk to the small pen where your oxen lie curled together, their sides rising and falling in a slow, heavy rhythm. You kneel by the fence, resting a hand on the broad back of the oldest ox. Its hide is warm beneath your palm, the warmth of the day still trapped under its short fur. You whisper your thanks to them too, for pulling the plow through stubborn soil, for standing patient beneath the burning sun. You promise them the same river wind tomorrow, the same furrows, the same gentle hush of the fields. You slip back inside, the night air clinging to your tunic. Your wife has laid out the woven sleeping mats, yours beside hers, your son curled tight against her side. She smiles up at you, her eyes half closed, her hair spread out like a soft fan on the mat. You lower yourself beside them, feeling the ache in your bones ease as the clay floor cools your back. You pull your son closer, his warm breath brushing your neck. Your wife hums a tune, so low it feels more like the river's song than a human voice, a hush that seeps into your ribs and settles your heartbeat. You close your eyes, letting the weight of the day drift from your shoulders. Somewhere beyond the walls, the Nile sighs its endless song, a promise that tomorrow will come just as this day did. You see the fields in your dreams, the furrows waiting for your blade, the seeds whispering under the soil, the oxen standing patient beneath the sun's first kiss. Your son shifts in his sleep, one small hand pressed to your chest. You cover it with yours, a quiet vow that the land will hold him too, when he is old enough to carry the plow's handle alone. And the gods listen, perched in the shadows, tucked in the hush of the lamps, drifting on the soft hush of the river, carrying your dreams into the deep, endless dark. Before the sun even brushes the horizon, you wake to the hush of the house. The clay lamps have long burned out, Only a faint hint of warm oil scent lingers in the air. Your wife sleeps beside you, hair spread across the woven mat. Your son shifts under the light linen covering, his small hand pressed to your chest. You lift it gently, careful not to wake him yet. You rise on quiet feet, stepping into the small courtyard where the air still holds the night's cool kiss. Above, the first stars fade into the deep blue of coming dawn. You draw in a slow breath, the first promise of the new day. You kneel at the small household shrine again. The clay figurines look different in the early light, softer somehow, their shadows longer on the mud brick wall. You press your palms together, whispering your thanks for the sleep that held you, for the dreams that drifted on the Nile's slow current. You ask the gods to bless the furrows waiting for your plow, to cradle the seeds beneath the warm, waking soil. A soft wind slips into the house, carrying the hush of palm leaves and the distant rush of the river. You feel it on your neck like a quiet promise. Today will come, just as yesterday did, just as tomorrow will too. Inside, your wife stirs awake. She rises with slow, practiced steps, wrapping her shawl over her shoulders as she stokes the small hearth. The crackle of reed kindling sparks the first tiny flame, the glow bouncing off clay pots and reed baskets. She grinds barley with steady hands, the pestle's dull thud blending with the soft hum she carries in her chest. You sit beside her for a moment, pressing your palm to her back. Her smile is a lantern in the half-light. Your son blinks awake, rubbing his eyes with his fists. He crawls to your side, his hair rumpled like the fields before the plow's blade cuts through at dawn. Once the bread is baking in the small clay oven, you lift your son onto your hip. He leans his head on your shoulder, half asleep, mumbling about the oxen waiting by the gate. You step outside to the pen. The oxen stand slow and steady, their breath steaming slightly in the chill before the sun rises. You run your hand along their necks, feeling the promise of strength under the thick hide. They shuffle in place, tails swishing like reeds in the river breeze. In the distance, the first line of gold splits the horizon. You glance back at your home, the hearth smoke curling upward like a small prayer that drifts into the brightening sky. You set your son down, his tiny feet pressing fresh prints into the cool morning soil. He reaches for the plow's rope, fingers brushing it with a sleepy smile. You take the plow's handle, old, sturdy, worn smooth by your father's hands and your own. You feel the land humming beneath your feet, ready to welcome the blade's cut, ready to cradle the seeds again. The river whispers its same slow song. The oxen lean into their yokes, muscles rolling under hide. You glance at your son, his small steps mirroring yours, the dawn's hush wrapping you both in a promise older than any stone or story. And so another day begins, as it always does, one furrow, one prayer, one breath at a time. The sun peaks above the horizon, spilling warm gold over your shoulders. Your bare feet press into the damp, cool soil, soft from the river's kiss. The oxen lean forward into their yokes, patient, strong. Your son walks beside you, one hand resting on the plow's rope. He yawns, eyes still puffy from sleep, but a small smile curls on his lips as he feels the earth shift beneath his tiny feet. You guide the blade down the first stretch, the furrow parting with a gentle hush. The river's song drifts through the reeds, mingling with the low grunts of the oxen and the quiet clink of the plow's wooden beam. Each step is a promise. For every seed you bury, a blessing will rise. As the sun climbs, the warmth settles into your shoulders, drawing the dew from your tunic. Your son's laughter drifts ahead of you. He's found a small beetle crawling along a reed, watching it climb onto his finger before letting it tumble back to the earth. The oxen's flanks glisten with the first beads of sweat. You pause to let them breathe, brushing your palm along their broad necks, feeling the steady rise and fall of their breath. In the distance, You see your neighbor at his own field, his figure small against the flat horizon, another quiet promise that no one tills this earth alone. You fall into the ancient rhythm, the plow's blade carving steady lines, the oxen stepping slow and sure, your arms guiding the handle like your fathers did before you. Your son drifts between your side and the reeds, chasing dragonflies that flicker like tiny sparks of sunlight. Sometimes he stops, pressing his small palm flat onto the turned soil, feeling its warmth. Above you, the sun is now a pale gold disk, still kind in its heat, but promising its full strength soon enough. You hum an old work song, each note carrying across the furrows like a lullaby for the seeds. Your son hums along, off-key, his giggles mixing with the river's breeze. When the sun rises higher, you guide the oxen to a patch of shade beneath a lone palm tree. You sink onto your haunches, wiping sweat from your brow with a strip of linen. Your son clambers into your lap, his hair sticking to his forehead, his eyes bright. You share a small piece of flat bread, tearing it with your fingers, pressing the soft crumbs to his mouth. The oxen graze lazily on the sparse grass, tails flicking away flies. You watch the rivers glimmer through the reeds. It carries every whisper you've spoken to the earth, every dream you've planted beneath its black soil. Your son drifts into a half-sleep again, head resting on your chest. The palm's fronds rustle overhead, shading you both in a hush that feels older than any word you know. Rested, you stand and stretch, the soil still warm beneath your feet. Your son slides down, wiping crumbs from his cheek, reaching for the plow rope once more. The oxen snort, ready to pull, their hooves pressing new stories into the earth. You guide the blade back into the furrows. With each pass, you feel the soil respond, soft, giving, promising. Above, the sun hangs heavier now, but its warmth is a comfort you've known your whole life. Your son hums again, tracing his small footprints in the dust. Tomorrow he'll be older. Tomorrow he'll hold the rope tighter. Tomorrow he'll know the field the way you do. One step, one furrow, one quiet prayer at a time. The sun now sits high, heavy and golden, pouring its warmth onto the fields like a blessing and a burden at once. The soil, once cool and damp, now smells baked, each furrow steaming gently as the heat presses down. You guide the oxen to the edge of the field, near the wide bend of the Nile. They lower their heads, lips pulling at the grass that grows where the river laps the bank. Your son kicks off his sandals, dipping his toes into the muddy shallows, squealing at the tickle of tiny fish brushing against his skin. You watch him, his laughter drifting over the ripples, mingling with the soft hush of reeds swaying at the water's edge. You find a patch of shade beneath an old sycamore fig tree, its broad leaves whispering secrets to the hot breeze. You spread a simple woven mat on the ground. Your son curls against your side, the curve of his small back pressing into your ribs as you both lie staring at the shifting patches of sunlight above. Your wife joins you, carrying a small clay jar of cool beer and a handful of figs she plucked from the tree's lower branches. You chew the sweet fruit slowly, feeling its sticky juice coat your tongue, the taste mingling with the salt of your sweat. In the hush beneath the leaves, you can almost hear the earth hum, the same tune your father heard, your grandfather too. Your eyes drift shut as the hum of the river, the rustle of leaves, and your wife's low voice telling your son an old story all blur into one long, gentle sigh. You dream in small images, the plow carving the earth, the seeds sprouting in slow motion beneath the soil, the river rising and falling in its ancient rhythm. In your dream, your son stands in your place, his hands on the plow's handle, the oxen pulling strong and sure before him. He turns, smiles at you, and in that smile, you see every harvest yet to come, every loaf of bread, every jar of beer, every hush of the river promising life again and again. You wake to the gentle nudge of your wife's hand on your shoulder. Your son giggles as a dragonfly lands on his knee, its wings a flash of emerald and gold. The sun has begun its slow descent, the heat easing, the shadows stretching long over the rippling river. You sit up, rubbing sleep from your eyes, feeling the warmth of the earth pressed into your back. The oxen stand nearby, heads bowed in the shade, tails flicking lazily at flies. Your wife hums a tune you've heard since you were a boy, the same lullaby that drifts like a breeze through every farmer's dream. You stand, gathering the woven mat under your arm. Your son walks ahead, sandals dangling from his fingertips, feet dusty and brown. The oxen follow, heads lowered, hooves stirring the soft soil as they make their way home. The village huts glow on the horizon, thin threads of smoke drifting upward, each one a promise that tonight the lamps will burn, the bread will bake, and the hush of sleep will cradle your bones once more. As you walk, you whisper to the gods again, small prayers folded into the hush of the fields, the warmth of your wife's hand in yours, the soft weight of your son's laugh as he runs ahead. Tomorrow, the plow will sing its old song again, and you will answer, one furrow, one harvest, one dream at a time. Long before the roosters call, before the smith's hammer sings or the goats bleat awake, the baker stirs in his bed of straw. His bones crack softly as he shifts, the chill of the cottage pressing against his skin. He pulls a rough wool blanket tighter over his shoulders, eyes blinking at the dancing shadows cast by the dying embers in the hearth. He listens, the muffled drip of rain that fell in the night, a soft creak of beams above, the hush of a village still wrapped in dreams. He imagines the loaves that will rise with the sun, crusts golden, scent drifting down muddy lanes, calling neighbors to his door. He lets his feet touch the cold earth floor. The chill wakes him fully, sends a shiver up his spine. He smiles at its familiarity. Cold floors, warm ovens, hands that know how to coax life from grain. His apprentice snores gently beside the hearth, wrapped in an old cloak twice his size. The boy's hair sticks up in all directions, a reminder of the baker himself, decades ago, when his father first trusted him with a handful of precious flour. He whispers a blessing for the day. May the dough rise well, may the fire hold, may all bellies sleep satisfied tonight. He pulls on his worn leather boots, cracked at the toes. With a dry twig, he stirs the ashes, breathes warmth back into the embers, and watches the tiny flames catch on the bundle of twigs he feeds them. The cottage smells of soot and old wood, the same comforting scent since the day he built this hearth with his own hands, fitting each stone with care. He pours water into the iron kettle, sets it above the flames. Soon, its gentle hiss joins the crackle of wood, a quiet morning symphony for one who has mastered the silence before dawn. Outside, a dog barks once, far off. Somewhere, an owl takes its last flight. The world is waking, but here in this cottage, the baker is always first. The baker wipes his hands on his apron, takes out the old wooden chest, and lifts its heavy lid. The flour inside smells of fields and sun, a gift carried from distant farms by wagons rumbling over rutted paths. He scoops flour into a wide clay bowl. A thin cloud of white dust settles on his hair and beard, catching the fire's glow like morning mist. He mixes in water fetched from the well yesterday. He pinches in salt, sprinkles in the yeast starter, a bubbling, living thing he feeds each evening with reverence. His hands move slowly, folding, pressing, turning, the dough soft at first, then springy, warm under his palms. He hums the tune his grandmother once sang as she baked, flatbreads over coals, a melody older than any book in the monastery down the lane. His apprentice wakes, sleep clinging to his eyes. The boy slips beside his master, small fingers poking the dough curiously. "Come," the baker says, his voice a rough whisper. "Feel it. The bread needs your warmth, too. Together they need. the boy giggling when the sticky dough tugs at his fingers. The fire pops softly behind them, tiny sparks leaping like fireflies. The baker lifts the heavy ball of dough, places it gently in a clean linen cloth nestled in a wooden bowl. He sets it near the hearth, where the warmth will coax it awake. The boy sits cross-legged by the hearth, tracing circles in the ash with a stick. He yawns, fighting sleep, but too curious to close his eyes again. Outside, a soft wind rattles the shutters. The smell of damp earth mixes with the rich scent of yeast and firewood. The baker stands at the door, peering out at the village roofs just visible in the gray light. Each thatched mound holding families, dreams, prayers that tomorrow will be full. Inside, the dough rests. So does the baker's heart, knowing that soon the oven will roar, the loaves will brown, and the village will wake to the smell of warmth. Before the day truly begins, the baker kneels by the hearth. He folds his calloused hands, closes his eyes, and whispers thanks for the wheat, the yeast, the fire, the quiet shelter that holds him, and the boy safe from winter's chill. The apprentice watches, eyes wide, mimicking the gesture. His lips move, but no words come, yet the silence is enough. Outside, a rooster crows, once, then again. The village exhales its first waking sigh. The baker rises, dusts flour from his knees, and smiles at the boy. "It is good," he says. "It will be a good loaf today." And the boy nods, half dreaming still, but certain that in this small cottage, in this warm hush of dawn, all is well. The dough rests, rising slowly by the hearth's gentle warmth. Now the baker slips on his thick wool cloak, its hem patched many times by his wife's careful hands long ago. He ties a strip of cloth around his head to keep the morning chill from his ears. With a wicker basket balanced on his hip, he steps out into the damp dawn. The apprentice trails behind, clutching a smaller basket. The village path is nothing but packed earth, soft with last night's rain. Each step squelches, a comforting sound that reminds him the fields will bloom again come spring. Thatched roofs poke from the gray mist like sleeping beasts. Thin spirals of smoke rise from crooked chimneys. A distant dog barks, and someone's rooster crows late, as if startled from its dreams. They pass by neighbors' cottages, a shepherd waving sleepily from his gate, a woman drawing water from the well, her breath misting in the chill. The baker lifts his hand in greeting, but keeps his stride slow. Today there is no rush, only the gentle hum of work well done. Beyond the last row of cottages lies a stretch of open fields. Here the earth glistens with dew. Skeletal winter trees cast long, sleepy shadows over narrow rows of winter barley. Baker pauses for a moment, resting the basket on a stone wall. He gazes over the fields, the same earth that feeds his flour, the same river that waters it. Without these fields, his hearth would be cold, his table empty. The apprentice clambers up the wall beside him, muddy boots leaving prints. He asks questions that only a boy would ask. Why does the frost make the grass sparkle? Why do the crows caw so early? Will the bread taste better if the sunrise is pretty? The baker chuckles, tousles his hair, and lets the boy wonder. The walk is long, but the questions make it light. At the edge of the village stands the great stone oven, a low, round dome, blackened from years of wood smoke and flame. It belongs to everyone, the lord's peasants and the freemen alike. Each morning, villagers come bearing dough wrapped in cloths, marked with special symbols so no one's loaf is lost among the many. The baker lifts the heavy lid, feeling the warmth from last night's coals still clinging to the stone. He feeds it fresh wood, stoking it until the chamber glows orange. Sparks leap and vanish in the cold air. Other villagers arrive, women with baskets balanced on hips, old men carrying trays of rising loaves. They greet the baker with soft nods and gentle smiles. He has fed them all these years. After all, one loaf at a time. The apprentice unwraps each loaf, eyes wide at the soft, sticky mounds ready to rise. The baker takes a small wooden stamp, a simple carving of a sheaf of wheat, and presses it gently onto the top of each round. This mark tells the oven keeper whose bread is whose, a small language known only to those who feed the village. They brush the tops with water, sprinkle with coarse salt. The boy dips his finger in the flour, drawing clumsy patterns that make the baker laugh. When all the loaves are marked and waiting, they lean against the warm stones, feeling the gentle heat seep through their wool cloaks. There is no hurry here. The bread will bake when it's ready. The sun will rise when it wishes. As the oven warms and the bread begins to swell, the villagers settle on rough benches near the fire. Someone passes around a clay mug of thin ale, warm enough to keep the chill away. Old stories drift through the steam. Tales of harsh winters survived, good harvests celebrated, saints thanked for rain at the right moment. The baker listens more than he speaks, nodding when the old women talk of dreams, smiling when the children chase each other around the oven's outer stones. His apprentice sits at his feet, eyelids drooping, head nodding from side to side. He places a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder, an anchor to keep him from toppling over. Here, in this small gathering, the warmth of bread and story bind them together, one village, one oven, one dawn at a time. The oven keeper, an old man with a back bowed like a willow branch, checks the coals with practiced hands. He pokes at the glowing wood, nods at the dancing flames, then sprinkles a handful of flour on the oven's stone floor. When the flour browns and smokes just so, he knows it's ready. He touches each loaf with the tip of a long wooden peel, a soft blessing in a language older than books. He murmurs something under his breath, half prayer, half promise that the bread will rise well and feed many mouths. The baker and apprentice watch quietly. In this moment, even the children stop their giggling, and the chatter hushes down to the crackle of fire and the scent of hot stone. One by one, the loaves are lifted from their cloths and slid into the oven's wide mouth. The oven keeper works with a grace that belies his years, a dance of ash and flame. The apprentice holds the extra peels ready, his eyes wide as the bread disappears into the belly of the fire. He asks in a whisper if they ever burn. The baker chuckles softly. Sometimes when we rush them. But good bread knows when to wait. The scent begins to change, from raw dough to the first notes of crust, yeast getting itself up to warmth, filling the air with a smell that makes the whole village feel like home. While the loaves bake, the baker takes the boy's hand and wanders toward the small market stalls near the village square. Early traders are setting up. Baskets of winter apples, wedges of hard cheese wrapped in cloth, smoked fish dangling from hooks, their scent mixing with the bread baking behind them. They pass a potter arranging simple clay cups, a weaver hanging coarse wool cloaks from a beam. Each greets the baker with a smile and a nod, a reminder that bread touches every table here, from lord to laborer. The apprentice's eyes sparkle at the jars of honey, but the baker only ruffles his hair and promises, "Tomorrow, if the loaves sell well, we'll taste something sweet." They return to the oven, where the keeper turns each loaf with gentle skill, making sure the crust browns evenly. The apprentice crouches close, nose wrinkling at the heat. He watches the bread swell, pale tops giving way to golden crusts that crack just so. Tiny blisters form where the flour met stone, each one telling the baker the story of the oven's breath. The old keeper hums a tune, an old lullaby about fields of grain, rivers that never run dry. The villagers lean in to listen, even if they've heard it 100 times. In this small circle, warmth is a language, and bread is its answer. While the loaves finish baking, the baker sits the boy down on an old stump near the oven. He begins a quiet story, a tale of how his grandfather once baked a single loaf that fed an entire family through a harsh winter. The boy's eyelids grow heavy but his mouth curls into a sleepy smile. His head nods, then snaps back up, trying not to miss a word. The baker lets his hand rest on the boy's shoulder, steady and warm. Above them, the oven's chimney breathes out thin curls of smoke that drift into the dawn sky, a promise that warmth, work, and patience always rise together. The oven keeper leans forward, peering into the orange glow. With a slow, careful twist of his wrist, he slips the wooden peel under each golden loaf. Steam curls from cracked crusts, a warm, rich scent that floats through the cold morning air. The apprentice bounces on his toes, eyes wide. Each loaf slides out, its base perfectly browned, crust dusted with stray flour. Neighbors gather closer, drawn by the smell. Children tugging at sleeves, hoping for a crumb. The baker thanks the old oven keeper with a nod. These loaves are more than bread. They are warmth for a dozen families, comfort wrapped in a simple crust. One loaf is always broken on the spot. Tradition says the first taste should be shared, so the bread knows it feeds many. The baker tears a piece from the warm loaf, handing small bits to the apprentice, the children, the old women who stand by with gentle smiles. Crumbs cling to tiny fingers. Butter, brought from a neighbor's churn, melts instantly on the soft crumb. The apprentice closes his eyes as he chews, a sleepy grin spreading on his flour-dusted face. The baker smiles too. This is the moment he bakes for, more than the coins or the praise. It is the moment when a simple loaf turns into warmth that lives in bellies and memories alike. The baker loads the remaining loaves into his basket, balancing them carefully. The boy, belly warm and full, carries a smaller basket, his footsteps slow, the weight a small test of growing up. They walk back through the muddy path, passing the same stone walls and thatched cottages. Now, smoke rises from more chimneys, chickens cluck near doorways, and dogs wag their tails at the scent of fresh bread. A young mother greets them, trading a clay jar of honey for 2 round loaves. An old shepherd slips a coin into the baker's palm, pressing it closed with a thankful nod. Each exchange is simple, but the baker knows each loaf means more than food. It is trust, trade, and the heartbeat of this small village. Near the far edge of the village, they stop at a tiny hut where an elderly widow lives alone. She sits by her door, wrapped in a patched cloak, her eyes bright despite the years. Without a word, the baker places a warm loaf in her lap. She touches his hand, voice barely above a whisper. "Bless you, lad." The boy watches, cheeks pink from the cold, heart warm from the sight. These loaves, the baker thinks, are never truly his. They belong to the village, to the hungry, to the quiet moments of kindness that keep harsh winters away. By the time they reach the cottage, the sun has risen fully, washing the thatched roofs in pale gold. The hearth still glows faintly, waiting to warm the chill from their fingers. The apprentice places the empty basket by the door, collapsing onto the straw mat with a yawn so wide he nearly swallows his own giggle. The baker smiles down at him, ruffles his hair, then kneels to stoke the fire again. In this small stone cottage, on this simple patch of earth, bread has done its quiet magic, feeding bellies, mending souls, reminding them all that warmth comes not only from fire, but from hands that shape dough before the dawn. Back inside the cottage, the baker sets a small wooden table with what's left of yesterday's stew, thick with root vegetables and a hint of smoked pork. He ladles it into rough clay bowls, the steam curling up to mingle with the faint aroma of fresh bread still lingering on their clothes. The apprentice rubs his sleepy eyes, spoon clutched in his small hand. Each bite warms his belly, and with every mouthful, his head droops a little more. The baker eats slowly, savoring the silence. Outside, the wind rustles the straw roof, but here, within these stone walls, the world feels smaller, safer. Like the circle of dough he shapes every dawn. When the meal is done, the apprentice curls up on a pile of straw by the hearth, drifting into a midday nap. The baker wipes down the wooden table, then gathers his tools, wooden peels, a cracked flour scoop, a chipped dough bowl. He sits by the open window, sunlight spilling across the stone floor. With careful hands, he sands the splinters from the peel's handle, patches a crack with glue made from boiled animal hide, and smooths the rim of the dough bowl with a small knife. Each repair is a promise. Tomorrow, these tools will serve him again, just as they have for seasons beyond counting. A soft knock rattles the wooden door. The baker rises to find the miller, a big man, shoulders dusted with flour, a friendly grin hidden in his thick beard. They sit together near the hearth, speaking in low voices. The miller brings news. The river's thawing early this year. Good for the grain, better for the mill wheel that grinds the precious flour. They share a cup of weak ale, warming their hands against the clay mugs. Stories drift between them. Which fields will need extra care? Which villagers can spare grain for the poor? And old jokes that make them both shake with silent laughter so they don't wake the boy. Outside, the village carries on, chickens scratching, a lone cow lowing from a nearby pen. But inside, the baker's cottage is a tiny world held together by flour, warmth, and friendship. When the miller leaves, the baker returns to the hearth. He settles into his old wooden chair, eyes drifting to the flickering embers. Memories slip in, gentle as flour falling from a sieve. His father's hands shaping dough in this same cottage, the smell of loaves on cold winter mornings, laughter echoing off the stone walls when his children were still small. He watches the apprentice sleep, a reminder that stories never end. They just change hands like fresh loaves passed around a fire. Outside, the sun has begun its slow descent, painting the thatched roofs in gold. Inside, the baker closes his eyes for a moment, not quite asleep, but floating somewhere warm between memory and dream. As the last light fades, the boy stirs and rubs his eyes. The baker rouses himself too, stretching creaky arms. He lights a single tallow candle, its flame flickering softly on the rough stone walls. Tonight, there will be no great feast, just a final piece of crust dipped in leftover broth, a mug of warm ale, and the hush of night gathering close around the cottage. The apprentice curls back up on his straw bed, drifting off to dreams of crackling ovens, fresh loaves, and warmth that never ends. The baker adds a few logs to the hearth, its glow flickering against the darkness, then settles into his own bed of rough linen. The village outside fades into silence, but inside this simple home, the story of bread and warmth keeps its quiet vigil, ready to rise again with the next dawn. In the quiet hush of midnight, the baker stirs on his straw mattress. A draft slips through the chinks in the stone wall, rustling the corner of his blanket. He sits up slowly, careful not to wake the apprentice curled beside the warm hearth. The low embers glow like tiny stars, crackling every so often, the only sound in the deep stillness. He runs a rough hand over his face, feeling the flour still embedded under his nails. The day's work clinging to him like a second skin. In this in-between hour, when the world holds its breath, the baker lets himself remember old dreams, the grand feasts he once imagined, the loaves stacked high for royal banquets. But he smiles to himself. Real bread, he knows now, is made in small places with rough hands and warm hearts. The baker rises and walks quietly to the tiny wooden door. He lifts the latch and steps outside, pulling his rough cloak tight around his shoulders. The village lies under a blanket of mist, thatched roofs like sleeping beasts, fields silvered by moonlight. Somewhere a lone owl hoots, its wings cutting the silence with a soft whoosh. He breathes in the cold air, sharp, honest, waking memories of his father doing the same years ago, checking the sky for signs of tomorrow's weather. His gaze drifts to the distant outline of the mill, a shadow on the horizon, but a promise that more flour will come. More dough will rise. More loaves will fill hungry bellies. Back inside, the baker pours himself a small cup of leftover ale, warmed by setting it near the hearth's embers. He sits on his stool, the old wood creaking under his weight, and watches the flame flicker across the rough stone walls. Each sip chases away the chill, soft, bitter, familiar. He lets his mind drift to tomorrow's dough, the feel of the flour between his fingers, the quiet stretch of the kneading cloth, the gentle hush of the rising loaves. He knows every crack in this cottage, every whisper of the walls as they settle around him. They are as much a part of him as the bread itself. Tomorrow's work. The boy's hands twitch, as if shaping invisible dough. The baker smiles, remembering when his own hands once moved the same way, restless, hopeful, eager to learn. He crosses the small room and adjusts the boy's blanket, tucking it around his shoulders. He lets his hand rest there a moment longer, an unspoken promise that the trade will live on, that the warmth will never fade while these walls stand. Outside, the owl hoots again, a lullaby for the ones who work before dawn. The last embers in the hearth settle into a soft glow. The baker places his empty cup by the fire and crawls back onto his straw mattress. His eyes grow heavy as the night hushes him. The slow heartbeat of the village, the promise of the fields, the warmth of bread yet to be made. As he drifts back to sleep, his last thoughts are simple ones. A warm hearth, a fresh loaf, a day's work done with care. In the tiny cottage, under the blanket of mist, the baker and his apprentice sleep on, a quiet promise that dawn will come, and with it, the smell of bread rising to greet a waiting village. Hours slip by like warm honey. In the half-light before dawn, the first birds begin to stir, tiny shapes flitting across the thatched rooftops, chirping softly to wake the village. The baker opens his eyes to the glow of pale light creeping across the stone floor. He listens for a moment, heart beating slow, as if even it must knead its way into the new day. The apprentice mumbles in his sleep, curls tighter under the blanket, but the baker knows it's time to rise. He swings his feet onto the cool floor, stretches aching arms, and takes in the familiar scent of ash, wool, and the lingering ghost of yesterday's bread. The baker kneels beside his worn flour chest, a sturdy wooden box passed down from father to son. He lifts the lid and runs his hands through the soft powder, letting it sift between his fingers like drifting snow. He checks for lumps, for any sign of dampness. Flour must be dry and clean, or the dough will turn sour. Satisfied, he scoops a measure into his cloth sack. A quiet promise passes through him. This humble powder will become tomorrow's warmth. Crusts to be broken, crumbs to be gathered by small hands at the edge of the table. He stokes the embers in the hearth, coaxing tiny flames to life with a breath and a twig. The soft crackle echoes in the stillness, the only sound besides the distant birds and the apprentice's steady breathing. The baker places a small clay pot of water near the flame, warming it for the first kneading. He sits back on his heels, hands resting on his knees, eyes half closed. These moments, half prayer, half ritual, tie him to the thousands of bakers who rose before him, who tended fire and flour while the rest of the world dreamed on. A soft rustle. The apprentice sits up, hair sticking out in a dozen directions. He rubs his eyes, yawning so wide it turns into a giggle. The baker smiles and hands him a tin cup of warm water. The boy drinks it in sleepy sips, eyes drifting to the small pile of flour ready to be turned into dough. The apprentice knows the steps now, the folding, the pressing, the patient waiting. But for now, he leans against the baker's shoulder, heavy with that early morning sleep that belongs only to children. Outside, the first rays of sunlight stretch across the muddy paths, nudging the village awake once more. Together, they clear the small wooden kneading table. They dust off the leftover flour from yesterday's work, sprinkle a fresh handful onto its worn surface, and set the wide clay mixing bowl in the center. The baker opens the window just a crack, letting the crisp dawn air mix with the warmth of the hearth. He dips his hands into the warm water, feeling the day's first chill leave his fingertips. The apprentice stands on tiptoes beside him, peering into the bowl, eyes wide with the wonder of what a bit of flour, water, and time can become. The village beyond the walls begins to hum to life. Distant footsteps, a dog barking, a rooster crowing its sleepy song. And in this tiny cottage, the promise of new bread rises again. With the kneading table ready, the baker pours the fresh flour into the wide clay bowl. He measures warm water from the clay pot, pours it slowly, a soft splash against the white powder. A pinch of salt, a sprinkling of yeast saved from the last batch. Each step like an old song, only his hands remember. The apprentice watches wide-eyed, standing on his toes to peer inside the bowl. He breathes in the smell, earthy, soft, comforting, a promise of bread yet to be born. The baker's fingers swirl through the mixture, turning flour into a thick, sticky mass, the first heartbeat of the new day's loaves. The baker nods to the boy. It's his turn. Tiny fingers press into the dough, poking and folding, sticking and giggling when the sticky mass clings to his knuckles. The baker's hands guide his, pressing here, folding there, shaping not just bread, but a bond that will rise again and again with each morning. Outside, the village wakes slowly. Distant chatter, the thud of a bucket drawn from a well, the muffled cluck of hens. Inside, the boy's laughter drifts into the beams of the old roof, becoming part of the cottage's memory. The dough, now smooth and heavy, is tucked into a wide cloth-lined basket. The baker drapes a linen cloth over it, letting the yeast do its quiet work. They set the basket near the hearth, close enough for warmth, far enough that the fire won't dry the dough. The apprentice watches the cloth lift ever so slightly as the dough breathes and grows. The baker settles onto his stool, the boy perched on a small crate beside him. They talk in whispers. The boy asks about the village festival coming soon, about sweet buns dusted with honey, about whether they'll bake something special for the old widow at the edge of the lane. The baker smiles. These small plans are what fill the gaps between the loaves. As they wait, the baker pulls out a small piece of leftover bread from the day before. He slices it thin, dips it in a clay bowl of goat's milk, and sprinkles a few crumbs of coarse salt. The boy nibbles it slowly, feet swinging beneath the crate, eyelids fluttering as if he might drift back to sleep right there. The baker takes his own bite, savoring the chew. Even day-old bread is good when the oven keeps its promise. Outside the open window, the dawn chorus of birds swells, weaving through the village streets like a song everyone knows by heart. After a while, the baker stands and crosses to the old stone oven outside the cottage. He opens its heavy wooden door, peering inside to test the heat with the back of his hand. A faint warmth greets him. Good, but not quite ready. He adds another log to the embers, watches the fire catch with a soft whoosh. The boy joins him, holding the long wooden peel like a knight's sword, giggling as he imagines the loaves like dragons to be tamed. The baker ruffles his hair, smiling. In the dance of fire, flour, and waiting, the village's hope takes shape, one loaf at a time, one dawn at a time. The dough, left by the hearth for hours, has risen tall and proud, a soft, pillowy promise of the bread to come. The baker lifts the linen cloth, his hands working with quiet confidence as he gently punches the dough down, folding and turning it with slow, careful motions. The apprentice watches every move, eyes wide, breath held, learning not just how to shape dough, but how to treat it kindly, like something alive. Outside the window, the dawn has given way to soft morning sun. The village is awake now. Distant voices, a squeaky cartwheel, a cow's lowing drifting on the breeze. The baker sprinkles fresh flour on the kneading table. His hands shape each loaf, pulling and folding the dough into plump rounds and long rustic petards. He shows the apprentice how to score the tops with a sharpened knife. Careful, shallow cuts that guide the bread as it rises in the oven. The boy mimics the motion, his tiny hands trembling but eager, the knife leaving wobbly lines that make the baker chuckle softly. Every loaf bears their touch, a story folded into its crust. Outside, a gentle knock at the door. The first customer of the day. An elderly woman steps in, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. She greets the baker with a toothless smile and hands him a small bundle of eggs in exchange for a loaf. Soon, more villagers gather, a shepherd with fresh goat's cheese, a young mother with her giggling child, who hides behind her skirts. They stand near the warm hearth, sharing gossip and laughter as the scent of baking bread drifts out the door, curling down the village lane like an invitation. The apprentice shyly hands out pieces of yesterday's crust to the children, who giggle with mouths full. With the stone oven glowing, the baker slides the shaped loaves onto the hot stones using the long wooden peel. A puff of steam rises as the dough meets the heat, releasing that first magical scent of crust forming. The apprentice watches from the doorway, fascinated by how the dough transforms so quickly, the oven's belly breathing life into flour and water. Outside, chickens peck at crumbs near the door, a goat bleats from a distant pen, and the soft chatter of waiting villagers fills the air like a song. As the loaves bake, the villagers linger, leaning against the cottage wall, sharing stories of the fields and family, new calves born, rumors of a traveling merchant passing through next week. The baker listens, nodding, his hands dusted with flour as he checks the oven now and then. He smiles when the apprentice pipes up with his own tale of a dream where he baked a loaf so big it fed the whole village for a week. Laughter bubbles up, warm as the rising bread, echoing into the calm morning. The stone oven exhales the scent of warm, golden crusts, the air around the cottage alive with the comforting smell of fresh bread. The baker opens the oven door carefully, lifting out each loaf with practiced hands. They thud onto the wooden table one by one, round loaves with scored tops, long petards with crisp edges, all steaming in the soft morning light. The villagers lean in, faces glowing, hands already reaching for their promised share. The apprentice watches wide-eyed. Every loaf feels like a small miracle. One by one, the villagers step forward, offering small bundles of eggs, wheels of goat's cheese, or a handful of coins in trade. The baker greets each one by name, the shepherd with his shaggy dog, the old widow with trembling hands, the blacksmith's daughter with a bright, shy smile. He slices the loaves with his worn bread knife, thick crusts cracking under the blade. He hands each piece with a nod, a quiet promise that no one will go hungry this morning. The apprentice stands beside him, placing each piece carefully into cloth sacks, tying knots with fumbling fingers. When the last villager leaves, the baker sits heavily on the stool, wiping sweat and flour from his brow. He pulls a small loaf aside, one saved just for him and the boy. They break it open together, steam escaping into the cool morning. They dip it into a shallow bowl of goat's milk, savoring the chewy crust, the soft warm crumb. The apprentice lets out a happy sigh, leaning against the baker's arm, eyes drifting shut as he chews the final bite. The cottage is quiet again. Only the faint crackle of embers in the hearth, the rustle of flour sacks being tied shut. The baker sweeps stray crumbs from the table, dusts off the last bits of flour, stacks the wooden bowls near the hearth. The apprentice helps, tiny broom in hand, chasing the smallest crumbs into a pile, giggling when he misses a spot and has to start again. Outside, the sun rises higher, spilling warm light onto the cottage walls. With the work done, the baker and his apprentice step outside, the village alive with the hum of daily life. Children chase chickens through muddy lanes, dogs bark at each other over fence posts, A distant bell tolls from the tiny stone chapel. The baker leans against the cottage wall, apprentice dozing at his side, head resting on his arm. He breathes in the morning air, sweet with hay, sharp with wood smoke, and always the faint ghost of rising bread. He closes his eyes, knowing that tomorrow will come again. Another dawn, another loaf, another story kneaded into warm crust and broken open for all to share.